but I want to say to all of you, thank you very much for your efforts and for your contributions. I really have taken everything that you have said seriously and tried to do the best that I can to balance what I hear. And there will be a bill. There isn't a bill yet. We're just not done drafting it, and as soon as we get it done, it'll be available to people. I'm trying very hard to balance the being flexible and listening with the putting something in writing. And once you put it in writing, it is in writing. So, you know, it's another balance issue, as everything we do is. At any rate, that's what I have to say. Thank you all for your contributions and your efforts. Beyond that, if you would like to have a discussion, we can do that. If you feel that you've said what you need to say, we can say Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and Happy New Year. It's all up to you. And I'm going to take that as, yes, Delegate Hill.
Yes, I would like to get a little back and forth because I don't think we really have addressed the issues that were raised over here by the Delegate Smith. We have not defined what a breach or violation of this means. If you get all the consents and the consents were appropriate, but you don't do the record keeping, is that a breach? I think those are issues that we definitely need, because I do think there's a little bit too much still mandated stuff in terms of what the caregiver is required to do. I think that it's worth having a discussion, whether it's here or during session, about, again, how much record keeping is really necessary and how much, I mean, I know some of that's part of the public trust idea, but I'm just interested in those issues.
Okay. I presume you capturing this, Linda. Good. Yeah, Delegate Valentino Smith.
Promise to be brief. You know, I have...
But it's the same standard I have for everyone.
You know, as a nurse and having taken many people through this process, including my mother, one of the things that I know we've talked about, Madam Chair, but that I think going forward we need to continue to with the bill is to make sure that however we feel about the bill or whatever the state decides to do, that it be available if the state does condone the option to everybody and not just those that have the ability to be able to afford it. And I think we have to work towards not being unintentionally discriminatory towards the poor or the non-covered to the extent that we can if we end up believing that this is an option, because some of the things out of Oregon and the other states have shown that it really is a very expensive proposition and available to only 0.2% of the population. And the other thing, just because the Judiciary Committee will raise it, and I forgot, is that Oregon showed us that about a third of the people are not exercising the option once they obtain the drug. It's a very serious and powerful drug that could have another market, could be an unintentional black market for this very serious drug for people to get their hands on for monetary purposes. But in any practice that I've been in as a practitioner, we've been very careful about how you waste drug and these very potent drugs and where they are. And in hospice, they give, and I know even with my mother, they brought me a brown bag of very serious drugs, but then they kept track of where those very serious drugs were. And I think that having a third of the population have in their hand what is the most potent drug that might be available, and I think Oregon was saying they're not sure what happened to the drug, is something from a Judiciary Committee and a policy perspective. We need to know what those penalties are going to be and what safeguards we're going to put into place to make sure that that drug is brought back into the system and disposed of or wasted appropriately like our other drugs.
For this conversation, I think that we would probably need to look at what's done with other drugs, and I think that I don't think we follow up and make sure people have turned drugs in, because I've heard from people, where do I turn them in? I have these things and I want to get rid of them, and we use the special days where there are events to...
Right, that's mainly for narcotics and Schedule
Well,
3
this
drugs.
this is not narcotics.
Some of them
And by the way, when you said population, a third of the population, you meant a third of the population who have
taken, right?
taken it, not a third of the population
Correct.
of Maryland. And I want
I
to be
think-
really careful with that since this is streamed. That was like a giant noise in my head there.
Only a third of the .2.
Point
I
two.
think 53 of the 155 to be
Thank you.
exact.
Right. So that puts that in proportion of what it is. I think that it is reasonable, and I don't know if this is the moment or if we need different people in the room. I know I don't really understand exactly the difference between barbiturates and narcotics and probably 50 other things. I presume that there is a substantial difference, but it's a good question, and I think that that's a reasonable thing for us
I just think
to
that
look
we'll call
into.
it the cocktail, once somebody has the cocktail.
Well, but the cocktail
that we
isn't
know.
narcotics. That's
But
the thing.
collectively, having your hands
Well,
on
they
it
have all these
collectively
narcotics anyway for
is-
the pain they're taking, and what are we doing with those? Yes.
Yes, those.
I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to get into what they're going to do with all the cocktails
Just-
they have, everything that they're taking in this bill, because I think that's, again, a broader issue, and it may be something that's of interest to you. But I think that we should look at what we do now and what we might want to do.
Right,
It's a good
just
point.
kind of raising it as
I
deliberations.
thank you. Anything else? No. Thank you. I see Senator Nathan Pulley and then Senator Young. No problem.
Love to see Senator Young. That's a whole different bill that we probably need to address.
It is.
Because many of us know that when you have extra medication, the pharmacy no longer accepts them. So there's something that's just hanging out there. What happened to those bills? You dump them down the toilet and flush them. It goes into the waterworks. Again, we ingest them after the purification process, and we develop more resistance to antibiotics and to other medication. And definitely not narcotics going down there. So these are some issues that we really need to address differently.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple things I wanted to point out and then say about some suggestions that were made. The bill is named after two prominent people from this area. One was Dick Israel, and I tell you, he called me he emailed me a week or two before he died and thanked me for introducing the bill and said he really wished and was hoping he'd make it to testify again this year, which obviously he didn't. And I just wanted to say that I've heard here, some want more requirements and some want less. This is a balancing act. I'm sure whatever bill we come out with, and we will come out with one, isn't going to totally please everyone. That's what compromise is. But some good points have been brought up. And I would suggest very quickly the things you brought up that you're concerned about, send us some wording as quickly as possible, and we'll look at it and see if it's feasible to place it in the bill. I don't know where all drugs are taken. I guess we can look at state law to see that, but possibly we take them back to the doctor or the pharmacist, or if there's another way of disposing them, whether we can include that in the bill or not, give us the suggestion and we'll look at it. I'm not going to name who, but a family member of mine who already lost a spouse saved a whole lot of morphine and has said that when the time comes that the morphine's going to be taken. I would rather have a law where this person can get the right kind of help from a doctor physician if they're going to make that decision, and that decision has already been made by that person. I know there are people now that try it at the end illegally, and some don't get there and wind up in worse shape than they were before in terms of suffering. So if we're going forward with it, I would rather see people do it under some standard where they're going to be successful than to to maybe leave themselves in some worse condition than they weren't. Slippery slope argument comes up a lot. In the states that have done this and in the countries that have done it, there is no evidence that a slippery slope has occurred. There are a lot of things brought up. Oh, this might happen, that might happen. They haven't happened where it exists. In terms of going the next step, in terms of the disability, people with disabilities, the slippery slope just has not occurred. And on physicians, I've had people come to me with the argument that God should decide when you die. Well, I know of all kinds of incidents where a doctor keeps someone alive after they don't want to be. And the person said to me, well, God gave them the ability to do that. Well, you can argue these things both ways. Then God gave them the ability to end it too. So I really don't think arguments like that come down to who God gave authority to. I think, again, it's a personal decision. And I just want to emphasize that it's everyone's personal decision. And as I said, I hope I go naturally. I mean, I think most of us would like to, when the time comes, just go to sleep and not wake up. But I still, as Jerry Brown said in his letter, would like the choice. So there will be a bill. I really hope that we can get input and suggestions and come back with a bill that satisfies as many and as much as we can. And when I was mayor, I used to have, in the 16 years I was there, I had people come to me with problems, and this won't work and that won't work. I quickly came up with something. Don't come to me with a problem if you don't come to me with a solution. I might not be able to use your solution, but you brought the problem, I'd at least like to see your solution. And if it's a real problem, hopefully you've given us the right one. And if not, the problem's still there. Hopefully we can come up with the right one. So really appreciate anybody that has concerns to actually come back with something to address it in a reasonable time so that we can have the bill drafted to take around to people and give them the opportunity to review it and to have an early hearing so that we can get a vote this year. Thank you.
With that, I will just say thank you and again, have a happy holiday.